Hey there, welcome to episode 91 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are recording this just after 1 p.m. on Tuesday, November 12, 2024. Today's topic, Bringing It Back. It's actually the title of the episode. What am I talking about? Well, stay tuned. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a Nevada nonprofit corporation, a 501c3 public charity. Our purpose is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Civic volunteerism is where it's at. The pay is horrible, the benefits are great. They just take a while. Yeah, we're an all-volunteer organization, and even this audio program is free, no sponsors. We're all in. So we are an organization bent on innovating, not only for our local communities, but for everywhere, with some of our bottom-up, as I like to say, not centrally planned, not top-down, but grassroots more so, efforts and initiatives that we have in place to try to connect and communicate and collaborate with other civic volunteers far and wide. So on that note, let's hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you are able to locate the show notes and 4 links. They're the 4 usual links. I don't have anything else today other than the usuals. And I will read to you the summary of today's episode, the plan anyway, in the show notes. I'll run down the links really quickly. They're the same as they have been. So don't feel bad if you fast forward through those. And let us begin. The summary of today's episode, our very first project and hackathon, the one that got the most interest for some time and the one that many people need to see happen, even though they have no idea we were even ever working on it, is finally getting some real attention. And so we are bringing it back. The 4 usual links. One is Innovate for Vegas Foundation's website, innovateforvegas.org. Innovate F-O-R spelled out, no number 4. Innovate for Vegas, no spaces, no dashes. Innovateforvegas.org. Basic idea of what we're up to. Our site was just migrated over to GitHub pages, and we're going to start integrating some of the actual initiative detail, not typed in as a static web page as it is at the moment, but actually pulled from the other repositories on GitHub. There's nothing magical about moving over to GitHub for the pages other than it's just easier to collaborate on and make changes to, and so on. So hopefully the to-do list is getting bigger again. So it was on the to-do list to just migrate over for a while. So some new stuff hopefully will make its way in there. As I've said before, I will quote once again my former colleague from Erfurt, East Germany, when there was an East Germany, Detlef, who was heard to say in his German accent, which I will attempt to duplicate here, and I will fail miserably, we work 24 hours in the day, and then we work at night. So that's, I got to stop sleeping. Finally getting some real attention, our various things that we're working on. Project.act.info, project-act, A-C-T, .info. That's the Autonomous Cohort Tessellation project. The intent is to use functional existing methodologies, maybe work with some new stuff. So if you know what RDF is, the Resource Description Framework, it's been around for a while. There were long ago some simple structures that one could implement as text files to provide information to people in a structured manner. You may know one of them, RSS version 1, that's RDF site summary. Unfortunately, RSS 2 is just plain old XML, but RSS 1.0, great example. Podcasts, other content, making use of the Resource Description Framework, and it's published in the same way, so it's not a radical departure. There are some other files and formats, tools and protocols, faux, friend of a friend, dope, description of a project, and many, many more. So we can make use of those to get started connecting people without having to sign up or register or agree to memoranda of understanding or any other such things. Don't even have to be a group autonomous cohort of one, your table is ready. So Project ACT will aim to give some of the autonomy of civic volunteerism back to the civic volunteers themselves. And then if they want to work together may mean in the same room, it may mean on the same planet. And even then, maybe not. agileforvolunteers.org. And by the way, the Project ACT and agileforvolunteers.org, they are the most basic of information pages at the moment. Once again, to-do list, very large. Agile for Volunteers starts with the basic principles of Agile, tools and methods. Agile was invented by and for software engineers, and it was actually in February 2001. Was it February 2001? It might have been. I know it's something like, are we coming up on 24 years? Maybe it was 2000, 25. Let's pause and refresh my memory because I've talked about this before. AgileManifesto.org will tell us 2001. So February of 2001, I'll leave it to you to explore the backstory. But it was a room of software engineers just deciding on, taking some inspiration from extreme programming, life experience, the waterfall method, which everybody loves, except that they don't really. They actually have some contempt for it. So project managers, they're okay with it. So Agile for Volunteers is our effort to not only expand from tools and methods for software projects, but tools and methods for initiatives made up of various component projects that maybe some code, but maybe language translation or co-creation plans or user experience designs or just plain old content like documentation or user interface descriptions and so on. So, and there maybe even be mechanical, like real world options. Got to make a sign, got to make a banner, got to make a mechanical object, got to make the sky's the limit, really. There really is no practical reason to limit the scope of civic volunteerism to writing an app. There is so much more potential. And finally, Mastodon for Vegas. Why do I have Mastodon for Vegas? Well, okay, it's Mastodon for Vegas. Mastodon.Vegas. You will still see the park page as of today. I have created the various cloud accounts and different test schemes and so on. So it's just another item on the to-do list. I probably should have had it done several days ago, except that I have not completely adopted Detlef's view of time management. I will eventually. I mean, it is a whole new era moving forward, and so we must get used to a new way of thinking about East Germany. Mastodon.Vegas. It will soon be Mastodon for Vegas. That is to say, a Mastodon server for things Vegas. So we'll have to work out things like policy. What are you allowed to say? How old do you have to be? And so on. But because we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3 public charity, we can always say that, hey, we are not doing this to get rich. We're doing this as a service to our community, and we would ask that people behave accordingly. If you want to spread this or that or talk about who knows what, launch your own server. The beauty of open source. But on with the show. I have yet to mention what is this thing we're bringing back. I have yet to create the cover art for today's episode, so it may or may not include a hint, but I am about to tell you. If I had a drum roll soundboard ready, I would insert a little sound effect. The initiative, formerly a project, but as I've already mentioned, the Agile for Volunteers, we have this overarching initiative notion. The Open Transit project back then, it was going to be a way to develop community-driven features and functionality that would make the local public transit system here in Vegas better for riders and drivers. Here, community is those groups of people who make use of public transportation to get around, and those who do the driving. And by extension, you'll often see someone get picked up or dropped off at a bus stop, somebody who's going to check. They may or may not be riding themselves, but they may be looking up a schedule for someone else. And I mean, there isn't a simple view, and that's what user stories are for, by the way. So So that is what I'm speaking of, our very first project, Open Transit, which we kicked off in about February or March of 2022. Seems like yesterday. The idea came about during a time when the software tools that the RTC, the Regional Transportation Commission in Southern Nevada, RTC SNV, the software tools that they have for consumers, that's us, to use are many, coupled with the reliability of the physical system itself. Now, they were going through some staffing chaos, and there may have been a strike in there somewhere. Were both demonstrably weak, really, to be honest. No-show buses, true story. Buses just don't show up for no reason. No reason given. They were a real problem. Still might be now and then. Guess why I can only be approximate with that? Because the current transit tool set does not include a way for riders to share information with other riders in real time. The transit app has something like this, but imagine this. If you're waiting for a bus and it doesn't show up, suppose you said, hey, I'm at this bus stop and I'm waiting for this bus at this time. You know, you can look at the time right now or when you post it, and the bus didn't show up. Guess what? You have now informed everyone else along that route that the bus is probably not going to show up for them either. How useful would that be? If only there was some way to accomplish something so complex. There is. So when we started this, it was fairly obvious. The no-show buses, like I said, the transit app, which is the preferred way to figure out what's going on with our local transit system, doesn't really do a great job of any of this. It's difficult to use for those with vision impairments, among other problems. And these are actual riders that I've spoken to with vision impairments that don't or can't use the transit app because it's not good. That's the tools we have to work for. So since 2 years ago, a few things have improved a little bit. There's a new company managing the drivers because, of course, their contract. Some efforts to increase safety and security on the buses themselves and at some bus stops. The way that you report issues like, hey, I don't feel safe on a bus or at a bus stop, you install a different app. So there's, what is it? There's Ride RTC. There's the Transit Watch application. There's the Club Ride. I think that's an application also. There's Transit app. So that's 4 now if you want to have the full joyful RTC SNV experience. Most of this, and by the way, if you're trying to access this stuff on your computer maybe or your laptop gotta have a phone, gotta install all these apps. Most of it, and by the way, when you file a concern with the app Transit Watch, you may or may not hear back from anyone ever. Most of the systems that we depend on if we use our local public transit system are not developed here. I'm speaking to people in Vegas right now, but most places are not where these things are developed. How can a smart city like Greater Vegas, and I'm putting that in air quotes, rely completely and totally on external vendors for something as vital as getting around our orange cone locality? And if you're not familiar, the orange traffic cone is I think people call it like the state bird or something, but it really could be the symbol of the state. The silver state? No, it's the orange cone state. Something is always under construction, always detoured, always running late. So we had a hackathon, our very first hackathon, which we would make into a monthly event. By the way, there were only 4 people who showed up, and none of those other 3, myself included, right? So the other 3 people long disappeared. Turns out they weren't actually serious, just kind of quarter serious. For our very first hackathon, we would make it into a monthly event. So we had our monthly hackathon meetup. It was aimed initially at specifying the project, and then we would do this on a rolling basis so we could grow the number of project opportunities for people to participate in addition to building interest in our organization. At the time, it was Code for Vegas. So Code for Vegas Foundation, we were having these, and then that's when we started hearing, well, I'm not a coder. But there's more to it than that. Okay, so name change. Our local innovator population was tiny, or the ones that were coming out anyway, and only got smaller. Still, we had some interesting and optimistic discussions including one with Jesse Diaz from RTC. Very, very interesting. 3 hours. Interesting for me. I don't know if it was interesting for him, which ultimately led nowhere. That is to say, RTC kind of went silent. Nobody was showing up to our hackathons. So apparently interest had waned. Unfortunate, but this is how we learn. As a user of public transit myself, I did sell my car about 6 years ago. I think will it be 7 years in February, maybe, give or take? Somehow aligned with Agile. I have become a fan of buses and light rail and trains and whatnot in various parts of the world, thanks to my time with Intel. So I travel quite a bit, and to me it seemed not always useful to try to rent a car and whatnot. Like, why spend time trying to deal with car rentals and dealing with a car in a place I am not familiar with? Sometimes a taxi, but more often I would try to catch a bus or a light rail for depending on where I was. So including in Vegas, I realized, hey, if I can ride buses in other places I don't know at all, why can't I ride buses in a place I do know and where I live? So I sold my car, despite the experience here being subpar. And that's not just me saying that. That's everyone I've ever talked to that's visiting the city of Las Vegas or the Strip, which is in Clark County. The buses here are horrible. No comment. This was always a project that interested me, and it still does. And now, of course, it's an initiative with kind of a more granular and possibly larger scope. Why initiative and not project? Because project is sort of a smaller unit. A project aligns with the theme and the epics and all that, and the initiative is kind of the umbrella. So an initiative can add projects, can remove projects, can change them around. They probably work together. So the Open Transit Initiative will aim to establish a community-developed functional platform for connecting consumers of public transportation services, operators, those are the drivers, and operations, so RTC SNV operations, for example. There are countless features and levels of functionality that can be explored when we take the time to engage our customers. That's all those people. And that means the riders, of course, those picking up and dropping off, as I've said, the operators, so the drivers themselves. I'll tell you, I'm going to interrupt myself here. I had a driver ask me one time, why isn't it possible to know ahead of time that there will be someone at a bus stop that needs assistance, a wheelchair or what are those things, scooters? Yeah, essentially, I need the ramp and I need to move the seating around, because guess what? Every once in a while, the bus will be full and they can't actually accommodate the person, so you got to let them know. And on a day when it's 110 degrees outside, why have that person roll out to the stop and then find out, I'm going to have to wait for the next bus? So some coordination between some riders and drivers, or knowing ahead of time that there is not space and so on. These are not hard. In general, the customers are people who make use of public transit, right? They should all feel empowered to make suggestions or point out things that are not working well. Because what is the point of public transit? To give people more headaches? No, I hope not. So the first thing, ditch the applications. Now, there are occasions when an application is useful, maybe even important, but when those are the only ways that you can access this information, it becomes problematic. Make it easier for people to figure out which bus, which stop, how late, is it showing up at all, file complaints, and by the way, also file compliments. I'll interrupt myself again and say, I think about 3 times now, I've said, hey, driver, how do we go about giving a compliment of some sort, an official upvote, a thumbs up, some sort of way of acknowledging that the driver was cool, the driver was extra friendly, went out of their way to whatever. Because a lot of drivers are kind of stoic, to say the least. They put up with junk all the time, junk being thrown at them, words being thrown at them, occasionally some violence, which is never good. Not that throwing things at people is not violent, but that's why they have the shields, the plexiglass and so on around them. But every once in a while, there will be a dangerous situation and whatnot. So the drivers are in a unique situation. The riders are also sometimes placed in harm's way occasionally, and that's why there's more security. But end of the day, every once in a while, you want to say, hey, this driver was cool. And the answer is always the same. Oh, first you have to make note of my contractor number. Then you have to make a phone call. Like, oh, people aren't going to do that. So how do you give good and bad, useful and useful feedback to our transit entities. There should not be a need to install a mobile application from Canada, for example, the transit app, to find a schedule, only to learn that if you are not using one of the supported platforms, maybe you're using a laptop or something, you are out of luck. Find that schedule someplace else. Now, we have to note, I did just check just moments ago. The transit app website, which I'm not going to share with you because I don't want you to even think about it. It's horrible. Does include one example schedule for a given route on their website. So you choose where you are. Okay, Nevada, Las Vegas. Pick a route. So they have all the routes that they support. Okay, let me pick my favorite, the CX route, the Centennial Express. Okay, it shows one schedule. It looks like it's the first bus in the morning, southbound. And by the way, the CX is a challenge. There are several routes in the RTC route plan that have some weird nuances that don't translate well to the transit app. I've tried to mention this before. It doesn't get me anywhere, so nothing to comment on further. So the CX South, okay, and you see it's basically the first route in the morning. Let me see other schedules. Install the transit app. Okay. So the website is only useful to point you to installing the app. But I just want to look at the schedule for the 3 p.m. Yeah, you got to install that application. Can I share a link to, you got to install that application. When your local agencies depend on third parties in other places, so the third parties are not local, they don't really have contact with us for customer service, and when those third parties are growing their effort to get all of the customers, they may or may not have time or inclination to service one user's concerns, despite those concerns being applicable to large swaths of their customers. Their customers in Vegas may not know any better. Like, the CX bus just doesn't show up. That was one of the things I learned. I think it was I can't remember if it was a 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. on a Saturday or a Tuesday. Maybe it was the Tuesday. Anyway, there were just buses that people knew. And sometimes it just doesn't show up. No information available for the riders using the vast array of tools that are very expensive. That is to say, the telemetry. Swiftly is a company in LA that does the telemetry gathering and republishing for real-time feeds the transit app uses, et cetera, et cetera. So all these moving parts, but nobody really talks to the people riding the bus. Do we give you correct information? No. Okay, well, maybe next time. They don't really listen. That's a true story. Transit app is not a great company when it comes to customer service. I've tried. I've sat in webinars about public transit with people from Transit app in Montreal. So, today's episode is going to be short. Good for you. It's been a long 7 days for some. So let's talk about the collaboration. We are looking at a third-party collaboration to advance the Open Transit Initiative, which will mean some open source developments along the original path, plus the possibilities of continuing development in larger scope with this other arrangement. If you'll recall, our labs notion, which was something I talked about this very early on for the first couple of months we formed, is to connect civic volunteers with the future of the projects that they contribute their time, effort, and expertise to. So if we take our open source initiatives and we develop them with civic volunteers collaborating, then we spin those initiatives off, spin them out, if you like, as labs experiments. Labs style. This was kind of inspired by the old Google Labs. Gmail was beta for like 15 years or something like that. So the notion would be, rather than it always being kind of an open source project, work in progress and whatnot, you deploy it, and you deploy it at what we call arm's length, right? So we have a commercial entity that would be able, and it could be a subsidiary even, depending on how we structure the organization into the future. But as of today, any third party could deploy the open source components and maybe add some value of some sort in compliance with the licensing terms and all that, and monetize this experimental platform. So it would always be kind of a beta. Not always, but initially it would always be a beta, right? So the first year or two, or I guess now the common thing would be a certain period of time. For a certain period of time, it would remain a beta, and a lot of people would be saying that it's a good platform, and it would be a beautiful platform, and it would be more amazing, more wow. So this is essentially the plan and the possibility of monetizing, or maybe even making standalone startups completely, like pushing it out and employing people. And as I've said many times, I don't really want people to work for free, but I want them to be willing to work for free. And those are the people, they've gotten this open source project to a point where it's functional and usable, viable, attractive as a platform, or as a whatever it is. It could be anything. Those are the first people that should be, I don't want to make it into like a velvet rope scenario, but like, this is your work. Do you want to continue to be a part of it? Nobody knows this stuff better than the people that have been working on it for the duration. Ideally, we can work with RTC SNV, that's the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada, and other transit organizations, maybe RTC NV, is that what it's called? Reno, Washoe County, and other transit organizations, or maybe just other transit organizations. Who knows? Maybe RTC won't want to be cooperative. That's entirely possible. With a collaboration between our customers, that's the people who use or work with public transit services, and our partners, we hope to make something so useful as public transit, even more so. Public transit is very useful. I don't know if you know that. Without wishing that third parties would listen to the people sitting next to us on the bus. So in other words, the entire notion of our civic volunteer organization is to engage with our fellow residents, I guess, the people in our locality, our fellow locals. Vegas locals is a common expression, but anywhere you are, the people who live around you, work around you, make use of things like public transit, roadways, the internets, depend on the local power grid, and anything where people are kind of communally dependent on something, or at least, use these utilities for what they are, utility. Public transit is a utility that people can make use of when they are able to. And the idea is to involve those very people in making the tools and the methods and so on better. I'm going to throw something out as an example. If, say, your city is corrupting local business and stealing money from them in some way by having racetracks run through your city for a large rich person event. I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm just throwing something out there. So there may be some impact on public transit routes and so on. So how do you tell people that? Well, you send them an email, like a bulk email, or maybe the application transit app will give some information maybe ahead of time, but like, can I look at the schedule for during the detour period during this street race? Maybe. Like, I really need to get to work at a certain time, or I have a test, I'm a student, or, there could be any number of reasons. And, that's what bus schedules are for. They should try to keep them. And when they don't, or when the detours, when the routes move, when stops are closed and nobody knows it, so that's happened to me directly. You get to the bus stop and you're like, oh, look, there's a little covering over it. This stop is temporarily unavailable. That would have been cool to indicate anywhere on any application. By the way, the GTFS is the standard format used for transit. What is it called? The General Transit File Stream? That might be what it is. It was originally Google Transit something, but GTFS. So there is a way to mark a stop as temporarily unavailable. You just have to do it. So making that easier to do would be part of the idea. And I should be able to plan my use of public transit for my daily or frequent or infrequent uses based on information available as calendars and maps and so on. They're kind of halfway there. Plenty of opportunity, though, to try out some ideas, get direct feedback. You can actually sit and talk to someone. And by the way, I've done this before. If you're developing something and you have someone pull it up on their phone and have them walk through like, so you don't know where, okay, that seems like something we could fix. So you actually work in situ with your users, your customers, and make the thing you're working on better. And I know some people who work on things, especially, I'm a software engineer myself, so I've heard this countless times. Who's going to ever want to do this? Or that's a loser error, which is, of course, a pejorative. You're calling someone who's using your product, and that's why you're working on it, a loser in some way. And by the way, they spell that L-U-S-E-R, loser. Another one is the problem is somewhere between the keyboard and the back of your chair. Right. So very condescending. And, the reason you're building or working on things and, from a software perspective or anything is not to put people down. So part of the initiative was going to be an opportunity for our local innovators to actually collaborate with, or it's called co-creation, actually collaborate with the people that will be using the thing that you're building. And you can actually see where, oh, yeah, we only thought about English language. And Vegas has a lot of tourists from other places. And I have personally tried to help people speaking Japanese and German and other unsupported languages. If you're not speaking Spanish or English, you're in the wrong city, I guess. We don't really know that. Low-hanging fruit. The internet has solved the problem of language translation and so on. And same goes for accessibility. When I first heard the first person I talked to with... He just had very thick glasses, right? So vision impairment with regard to how well he could see, but he was not completely sightless, but still required a certain amount of attention, trying to locate information and so on. And the story itself is long regarding a schedule change that they really did a poor job of publishing and so on. There again, the app would have been helpful, but he said, yeah, I have to use... the phone service. So I called them this morning to make sure the bus was going okay. And they said, yeah, they never mentioned a schedule change. And I said, oh, so you can't use the app? He said, no, I can't see. The app is not really good for vision impairment because why would you make a mobile application for consumers of public transit services that's accessible to people with limited vision? Those people they would just drive. They would drive themselves to work, right? So just silly. It's a result of not honoring the customer. And if you heard my episode last week on this very audio program, honor the customer. It's pretty simple. Why are we building the thing that we're building? To be cool? Maybe. But sometimes it's really to make a difference. And that's what we are aiming for. So the Open Transit project, now the Open Transit Initiative, it has some cool ideas already. And ideally, as we kind of I don't want to say reboot, but we move it to the front burner, I guess you could say, and we merge in some of the Agile for Volunteers infrastructure that we've been working on, and we can engage with a third party, and we can try that whole model out to see how it works. And our third party collaboration will be a nice example of the labs concept, and if we can actually include our civic volunteers as they come out of the woodwork, and this is suddenly interesting to me because I don't know why. I don't know why people don't continue the interest that they start with. The Irish Goodbye is very popular in the civic volunteerism space. And if you don't know what that is, you need to know more Irish people. And that's enough callbacks to my FFS Talks audio program. Looking forward to getting Open Transit into some usable or demonstrable state, and then we'll see what happens from there. And I'm not optimistic about RTC cooperating. They don't guarantee in any way the real-time data that they publish, so it could disappear tomorrow and it would completely disable our platform. And that was one of the reasons it got backburnered, because they refused to guarantee the data availability. So I guess that's what you get for being a community development project from our bus system that doesn't always have buses that show up and doesn't always tell you. So much work to do, but so much potential if you believe, as I do, that chaos is opportunity. And that's another callback to Cafe Genius Impresarios. And that is where we'll leave today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to check out our website, innovateforvegas.org, innovateforvegas.org. And the rest of the sites either will be or are linked. Actually, I think none of them are linked right now. That will change, but you've found this episode, and so you should have found those links, or rewind to the beginning, and I will read them to you again. Thank you. Until next time, listeners.